that's all I'll say about the Center for Fiction, except to say that we're so happy and excited for this event tonight. I'm the director of public programming, and I've been looking forward to this for months and months and months since Claudia first brought the idea to us. So I'm going to turn the program over to Claudia Norman now.
Thank you so much. My name is Claudia Norman. I'm the founder and director of the Celebrate Mexico Now Festival. And thank you so much for coming here. Thank you to Melon McNair, Noreen Tomasi, and the entire staff at the Center for Fiction for having us here tonight. Pretty much the spirit of the Celebrate Mexico Now Festival is to create partnerships. So what we are doing tonight is just that. We are partnering with the Center of Fiction to bring a very interesting program on indigenous languages, and obviously this is possible thanks to sponsors, collaborators. I would like to thank the Center for Mexican Studies at CUNY. Thank you so much, Jose, for all your support putting this program together, to the Mexican Cultural Institute of New York and Aeromexico for allowing us to bring Gabriela Badillo from Mexico to be here present to do a presentation. And so same thing. I hope you can follow us on Instagram and Facebook and all the social media. You have your programs in your hands, so we still a couple of days to go. And an important message: we are having a brunch on Sunday, to support the family, to reunite families. All the proceedings are to pay for legal fees. And tomorrow we have a group coming from Merida, Yucatan, premiering a piece based on a poem, a Mayan poem from Briseida Cuevas, which is a contemporary female Mayan poet. So, but tonight we decided we thought it was very important for the program for Mexico Now. This is the year of the indigenous languages, and it's an honor to have here with us Miriam. It's a great colleague. We met and we've been trying to do something together. Miriam is the official representative of the Indigenous Affairs at the United Nations, and I'm going to pass the microphone to her so we can start the program. Thank you so much for being here.
Ayituta tukuikuna, ñukakshuti migan Mirian Masaquiza, ñukamikani Ecuador mamayaktamanda, ñukak alpamanda shamushkani kangunam kununtuta tuparingabu. Hello everybody, my name is Mirian Masaquiza and I am Quichua Salazaka from Ecuador. And of course, it's an honor for me to be here with you tonight. And thank you to all the organizers and especially Claudia for making through this dream. And of course, we are very happy to be in this venue talking to you. And especially, I hope that tonight you will go back to your places and have a little bit more of in your hearts something about indigenous peoples and of course the languages, indigenous languages. So just to share with you, I prepared a few things that I think would be important that I can share with you before we start the program, and I hope that you can allow me to address this. So languages, as you know, are crucial importance for people and the planet. People not only embed in languages their stories, traditions, memory, traditional knowledge, unique modes of thinking, meaning, and expression, but more importantly, they also construct their future through them. Despite the immense value, languages around the world continue to disappear in alarming rates. This is cause of serious concern. One estimate suggests that at least 50% of today's languages live be extinct or seriously endangered by 2100. Another equally realistic estimate predicts that up to 95% of the world's languages are under threat. These languages are central to the identity of indigenous peoples, the preservation of their cultures, and they are an expression of self determination. When indigenous languages are under threat, so are the indigenous peoples themselves. This is something that we need to understand, and I hope that this would be, of course, carry on with you. Indigenous peoples live constantly with the threat of forced eviction and are increasingly migrating towards urban areas where they may face discrimination, employment barriers, poor access to service, or maybe just lack to access of services, and difficulties sustaining their languages and culture identity. Article 13 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, a document that is the most important instrument that supports indigenous peoples and their rights, states that indigenous peoples have the right to revitalize, use, develop, and transmit to future generations their languages, oral traditions, philosophies, writing systems, and literatures. The UN General Assembly proclaimed 2019 as the International Year of Indigenous Languages. Through this year, indigenous peoples, states, other stakeholders has been organizing many events, several discussions, roundtables to address and see how they can contribute or how they can make sure that the indigenous people speakers could be more fluent and not just be sitting perhaps in these books or perhaps in films. That's the main issue. That's the main call from indigenous peoples to ask that languages be alive. So, with this short introduction, I would like to, of course, invite you to see one of the very important ways of promoting indigenous languages, because, as you know, they are indigenous peoples are more than 90 countries. So this afternoon, this evening, we will have the opportunity to learn a little bit more about the 68 Voices, 68 Hearts by Gabriela Badillo, which is one of these initiatives. Let's learn about this project. But before we can scream this project, I would like to share that is a series of animated shorts that retell 68 indigenous people stories narrated in their indigenous languages under the premise that no one can love what they do not know. So I invite you to look at this. Thank you. I hope hello. I hope that everybody is listening well. First of all, congratulations, Gabriela. It was a very touching and nice screening. I guess you agree with that, right? Can we give a round of applause to Gabriela, please? Thank you. And I will, of course, do it. So this afternoon, evening, night, I would explain a little bit how we are going to do this. This is a very interesting panel. I have two speakers here, and sorry. And then I prepare few questions, and of course each one will reply back, and then if we have time, I will ask another question, and then immediately I will, of course, turn to the audience in case you would like to ask any particular questions to Gabriela or to Américo. And then this is a very interactive discussion, and I hope that you can participate. And if you need, if you of course have any question, please, if you can address it to the speakers here or to me, of course, I will be happy to reply. And then yeah, I think that's how we are going to proceed. And hopefully you will enjoy. So let me now introduce Gabriela. So as you see, I have some of my notes. So Gabriela Badillo is a creative director and co-founder of Hola Combo, a design and animation studio that believes in social responsibility as a means of communication. So I think she will, of course, introduce herself, and then later on, and then also I have here in our middle, in Spanish we say bendito entre las mujeres. I am not sure how they say in English, but we have here Américo. Américo teaches at the University of Pennsylvania, where he established the Quechua language program. His research on Andean culture, Quechua language, and cultural policies has been featured in major institutions. We also invite him 2 years ago, I think, to speak on indigenous languages at the United Nations. So though they are my invitees, and let's proceed. So often in many of the indigenous peoples communities, older speakers are dying and younger speakers are at the best bilingual in an official language, but increasingly monolingual in Spanish, English, Portuguese, French, among other national languages or official languages of different countries. Additionally, many indigenous children and youth who still speak an indigenous language have a more limited vocabulary and may even have a more restricted range of syntactic structures than older speakers. So when we were watching this film, so we clearly see that we hear, of course, the voices of, I hope, indigenous speakers. Gabriela will explain a little bit more about that. But also, maybe you notice that most of the screenings was really connected to the nature, land, forest, thinking, traditional knowledge, how the universe was created. So this is very similar to indigenous peoples, of course, in many parts of the world. And then unfortunately, this is why indigenous peoples are very, very connected to the nature, to Mother Earth, as we call Pachamama in our region. So thinking about that, I would like to, of course, ask Gabriela if she can share with us how this project was done, how indigenous peoples participated in this project. That piece is really important So people here, and of course the ones that are following us, understand a little bit why it's important that indigenous peoples have a voice in this kind of projects. Please, Gabriela.
Uh, well, first, thank you to the Center for Fiction and Claudia Norman and the festival Celebrate Mexico Now. I apologize for my English in advance. This project was born 8 years ago, more or less, and was created because of a personal, um, very personal thing about make social projects, and also because my grandfather has ascendants, Mayan ascendants. Maya is a culture of Yucatan in Mexico, and he passed away 9 years ago, more or less. And was in that moment when he died that I became conscious of what I have lost, not only a beloved one, but also culture, traditions, jokes, words. And I think most of us happened this, that when we lost something, we became aware of what we have lost. And then in that moment also, well, 20 years ago, more or less, I make a social work in a community in Yucatan also, and there uh, was very sad to saw all the mothers that doesn't want that their didn't want that their children spoke in Maya, because they don't want that they don't want that they suffer what they have passed the discrimination. I think that that was my first acercamiento, approach to discrimination, also like 20, 30 years ago. And then 9 years ago, I found a poem of Miguel León Portilla. He passed away a few days ago, and was a great Mexican poet, and was the first short that you saw, the short of When a Tongue Dies. And this poem for me was the spark that created this project. Uh, Read his poem and read about how when a tongue dies, a world, how we can see other cultures, a window, everything is closed, make me conscious. And now, when I started the project, was more like a project of investigation, and it was a personal project. But in these 8 years, what we have done is to create the project that it's done or developed with all the communities, not only for them, but with them. So that's why we are working now with the communities, like you see in the last two shorts. There are drawings of the children, and we work then in the communities with the elders also to learn about what traditions or what stories they want to retratar,
To share.
to share. And then we then make with them the translation, the the voice, and we invite all the children to make the drawings, and then later we make the reinterpretation of the drawings with incredible talented illustrators, Mexican illustrators also, because we wanted also to make a statement that these are living cultures, these are living communities and actual communities, that there are no static sculptures in museums, that are in a contemporary moment also, and that we are all mixed.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. That's really important. Also, I just wanted to get back a little bit when you describe why was your inspiration. So that's really powerful. And again, I am inviting you that after this, of course, in your house, in your communities, with your brothers, sisters, family at all, go back and talk about this. Why sometimes people think that these indigenous peoples are just um, an obstacle for the development, and they want to still keep their indigenous languages.
So that's sometimes the response maybe. So now Américo, it was very interesting to see how this brother, I call him brother because we met like years ago, and then little by little in the university he established this program that gives visibility to indigenous languages, particularly to the Quechua language. And of course, we always are thinking that translation of the languages into the official or national languages, as we see here, there is not really support for that. There is a kind of lack of resources for that, not only financial but also sometimes resources, human resources. So, and then it was very interesting to see that this famous movie that everybody knows, Dora the Explorer, invited Américo to help them as a consultant to prepare some part of the script. So how this approach was done, if you can please share with us. But also very importantly, how did you manage, to contrast the script that you translated into Quechua, but also what was the other sources to make sure that what you did was actually capture the essence of what was the main message. So please, Américo.
Ipaichani, Mashi, Miriam, Tlasukamatli, Claudia. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Yes, I think that when I was contacted by Paramount Pictures to work for this movie, I couldn't just see it as a job or as a responsibility to do, as a task to do, but also a responsibility. First, because it's representing my country, the cultures that belong to the places where I grew up, and therefore, but I also knew that this is a Hollywood movie that has to follow certain guidelines, and therefore there are some things that we had to negotiate. So, but I also first, like speaking about resources, I tried to think myself as someone from the Andes, as also think maybe I'm kind of like following up with what Gabriela felt, but thinking about my family. Like my mother is from the Amazon, and this movie is set up in the Amazon region. So the first thing that probably came to my mind was my grandmother, who still lives in the Amazon, and how would she maybe watch the movie, understanding that it's a very massive movie, not catered to an indigenous audience or not catered to a Latinx audience, but at the same time try to respect and incorporate aspects. When I checked the script, I made some suggestions. I thought that some aspects could enrich the plot. Uh, I am glad that they were quite open, following the guidelines, but they were quite open to do that. And and then while this process happened, I tried to talk to other Mashikuna, and I am not a native Quechua speaker. I learned Quechua when I was a student, and even though, and in that process, I also learned that people in my family speak the language, but I didn't grow speaking of the language. And I think it's good that at least in rather Gabriela or my own journey, that's something that now, thanks to maybe these spaces, we are able to talk and recognize. Because for a while, that's something that we had to hide, or we felt pressure to hide. So while the movie script was being finished, I was able to talk to other people and get the resources of, I don't know if the word resource sounds more like taking and not giving back, but more like as an exchange. And also, again, always thinking I couldn't be completely objective because of all the ties around. It was nice to be able to talk to other Quechua speakers, some of the native Quechua speakers, about what we were doing. And also, once the movie came out, I was also happy to see the kind of like how people receive the movie and the words that we use, especially during the Quechua dialogues. Um, there is a moment where when there's a dialogue between the main character Dora and an Inca princess in the movie, and we thought, or how should we translate the word explorer, or how should we translate the word earth? And for people who are familiar to the Andes, the word earth, at least the closest I could think about, would be Pachamama. But of course, understanding that the word Pachamama doesn't only refers to the space, but to the time and space where people belong to. In contrast to the idea of the earth that we just take resources and we don't care. And again, the word explorer, again, maybe considering the colonial legacy, could be problematic. So when thinking on how to translate that word in a respectful way, then it came the possibility of thinking of the word of the expression Purixipas, or Pachamama Purixipas, which translate more into the person who walks around the Mother Earth. And I was glad that after the movie came out and people was able to watch it in Peru, in Cusco, many people told me that they really liked that translation, that it really encompassed the idea of going around the world, but not with a colonial lens, but as someone who appreciates and embraces and learns, not only looks for other cultures, but is willing to learn from them and learn from values as nature and the water, and not just seeking to take and appropriate things.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Thank you, Américo, for this. As you can see, the whole idea of indigenous languages, also as Américo is explaining, is very difficult to see and or to translate into an official language the meaning, because sometimes there are no words related to what indigenous languages really are referring to. So in that case, um, there is always a discussion about the traditional knowledge. Some indigenous peoples agree that it should be, of course, translated in different languages or official languages, but also others stand with the idea that it shouldn't be like that. That not all the traditional knowledge should be translated, because that's mostly something that it's inherited and perhaps it's not used in a right way. So these two positions sometimes are politicized. So especially as we just discussing previously before come here. So maybe I am not sure who of you would like to respond to this, but I would like to pose the following question that I also prepared. From your perspective, what actions do you think that are needed in order to increase the number of fluent indigenous language speakers?
I think that, and what I have learned in these years that I have been with this project, is that the languages are for use them. And the way that we can revitalize the languages or indigenous languages is using them. We cannot put this effort only in the government or in the teachers or in some institutions. It has been uh, inside the communities. It has been a social or a community project, and in all the families. We have to talk, write, read in first language, and all the kids have the right to learn to play in their first language. So I think it's a matter of identity and to be proud of what of who you are and wanted to share with all the people and wanted to preserve them.
Mhm. Thank you, Américo.
I think it's important to be aware, as you mentioned, Miriam, that because as a scholar, I belong to an institution, in general, academia, that has a long colonial legacy. Anthropology departments were tools to conquer or to take away things. So, but at the same time, we are standing in a platform that legitimize things, and that has tools and resources, and we can work to decolonize these spaces. Considering that there are more in this, speaking about the specific case of the United States, a more diverse body of students joining these institutions where they should also feel reflected. And that's why I'm glad that we have the opportunity to have Quechua as a program. I get many phone calls or emails from people who they don't even live in the States, but they are glad to know that this exists because the university provides that, again, for the good, for the bad, that legitimacy of the existence and the value of the language. But at the same time, because it has a colonial legacy, there's a fine line, and we need to always check. I feel like there's no like a clear formula, but always to just be in contact with communities, with people, so we can always try to do the best and understand that. I agree with Gabriela that, of course, respecting each person, each community, but to break the stereotype and use languages in everyday context and let people to appropriate rather in movies or iPhones or taking the subway.
In different tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Excellent. So just to share with you how we are with time, I would like to give you maybe some 10 minutes or less maybe for questions. I see some hands there. So maybe I will take 3 questions. And if time permits, we will of course continue. But to my speakers, if you can respond, if it's possible in 1 minute, would be good. Otherwise, we will be not able to take all the questions because I can see the audience very happy to ask. Okay, so please, sir.
Hello, I'm Terrence. I just have a brief statement of appreciation, not a question. I'm familiar with your language, Quechua, having read about it and heard about it in different forms of media. Um, but all the other languages I've never heard of. And so I'm just glad to be presented with not just the languages, but with the cultures behind them and to hear native speakers um, and how they view the world. Because here in America, um, we only have one way sometimes in terms of Christianity or in terms of different ways of how creation was founded or how different things came to be. So I always love to visit different places and hear from locals um, their view, their window of the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Favorite filmmakers are Mexican, including Alfonso Cuarón and Guillermo del Toro.
Thank you. Thank you for using very straight the time, of course. I appreciate it. Please, our
My question, I have a twofold question. I love beautiful origin stories, um, but I just wanted to ask, when are they typically told? Are they told these origin stories told when uh, kids are young from grandparents, or are they told what kind of settings, like big family occasions, celebrations? When are they typically told? And Gabriela, you touched on the artwork a little bit, beautiful artwork. So I just wanted to know the collaboration between the people people doing the artwork and the narrators. How did exactly that came about? Because it seems so exact, like the artwork and the narrators telling the story.
Okay, now one question, another question, please, and then we can
Yeah.
go back. Yes, please.
Thank you. Um, the film was so impactful, and I'm a high school teacher and a writer. I was a journalist, and my question is, what are some next steps that we can take on as audience members to honor the rich traditions that we just saw, and just obviously it's very impactful. So, what is something that we can do as audience members?
Thank you. So please, Gabriela and Américo, if you can elaborate on the questions, and then, if, of course, if we have time, we will
Yeah,
continue.
sure. About the
1 minute.
stories, most of them are stories of oral tradition, and they are told, most of them from the elders that have most of this wisdom. But also there are some stories and poems of contemporary writers also. Uh, as I said, these are living cultures and living communities, uh, actual communities, and there are a lot of writers, com- compositors,
Composers.
composers also, um, actual doing things. And about the art and the narrative, um, as I am like director, director, designer, and animator, we work with all the illustrators and with the story to make all this an storyboard of how we are going to tell the story using metaphors, using also some kinds of respecting all the communities and the cultures, using maybe some of their textures and some of their metaphors of their myths and cosmovision to make them implicit in the stories also and in the art.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just briefly, I would say that how to be more aware about these different, culturally speaking. I would say that when we approach these stories, we should see them as knowledge and use that word. I mean, of course, there are stories, but this is a different way, a different mechanism, a different technology of sharing knowledge. And when we call it knowledge, then we put in another category. We respect it the way as it should be. Most of these stories talk about the respect of the land, the universe, and therefore now we talk, for example, about climate change, and everybody now finally, well, most of us agree with that. But we need to remember who has been taking care of the land, who are keeping this knowledge, and they're doing it maybe not in the way we are used to, but this is knowledge, and therefore that's a way to be more aware of that process.
Mm-hmm. To add to the question, to mention that it's very important the academia community, of course, not only states or indigenous peoples, but when you are preparing your research papers or you are interviewing somebody, always try to identify also the name of the indigenous language, because that's also very important. Why I am speaking my Quechua language is a form of resistance. So that's something that we would really appreciate it, of course, if you can do that. And then because the 2019 International Year of Indigenous Languages, there is a plan of action, which is a guide prepared by UNESCO, but in full cooperation with indigenous peoples. So there is a kind of list of what you can do as just as an individual, what you can do, what different agencies or like this beautiful office, what you can do. So I invite you to check out that, and then if you can, of course, implement that, would be great. So now I think, let me see, we have another 5 minutes before we finish, and of course I would like to hear in 30 seconds some final comments. So maybe if you have any question. Yes, sir.
Hi, for Gabriela, if you can just mention also, I know that the film is called 68 Languages. and just if you can touch a little bit about the linguistic variations that we have in Mexico, the 364, and how was it a challenge for you to decide which linguistic variation to use for the 68 languages?
Yeah. And now we're
I think that's all right because we only have 5 minutes, and I would like to hear from
okay.
you.
Well,
I am
as you said, in Mexico we have 68 languages. There are 364 languages, but they are a group in 68. And the decision of which variation we use has been also because with which community we can go, or which community has been more ritual to to work with. And I want to add something about the last questions also. This project was made as Miriam said at the beginning, in the premise of no one can love what they don't know. And we wanted to reach a target of people that are non-speakers, but also all the speakers. Because in Mexico, we have only 10% of the people of the people of Mexico recognize themselves as indigenous, and only 6% spoke a language. And this is a matter of we want to help and to make to be a tool that help them to be proud of what they are, of be part of these communities, but also to reach all the community that is non-speakers, to know all the diversity that conform us, all the richness that we have as humanity and as country in the diversity, and help them also to know it, respect them, and love it.
Yep, thank you. You can use your 30 seconds.
Thank you. Well, part of the project, the thing that we are looking for with this project is not only to be a catalog like we are butterfly collectors. We want it to be a spark that create actions inside the communities and outside the communities. That's the important thing for us.
Thank you, thank you. That's a very strong message. Américo, please.
I think that learning about the languages and their cultures is a first step to, at the end, recognize the speakers. And once we recognize the speakers, especially in the countries where they live, but also it's important to remember that they travel, like they're not static in time, right? There are many Quechua speakers, for example, in New York City, but to see them that by recognizing the language, the culture, and the speakers, then we will recognize them, hopefully, as full citizens of their own countries, because that's a goal that unfortunately we haven't reached out until then. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I conclude, I would like to say sorry that I rush with this, but they will be here another 15 minutes, so you can talk to them and then get all the information. And I think I just wanted to again thank you, Claudia. Thank you to this beautiful space. I hope that the doors would be open also for indigenous peoples. I am glad that they have the hearts of indigenous peoples. Even though they are not, or maybe it's by self-identification. They already mentioned something related to that. Again, my name was Mirian Masaquiza, and I am working by coincidence maybe, or because my ancestors maybe 30 years ago came to the United Nations to knock the doors and say to say that they are here and they are the owners of this land. They are not outsiders. They are the first peoples, that they still speaking our languages. They're still speaking, I mean, they are still governing themselves as indigenous peoples. And then I think we, also myself, I am Quechua from Ecuador, as I said. I am learning every day. At the UN, our language is always opens an official meeting of the UN. Even to do that, that was a sign of resistance, and we have that. So thank you very much for being with us, and claps for them, and have a good day. Gracias.